to galacticconnection.com, one of the most popular blogs on the World Wide Web today for alternative news. Stay tuned for the latest information on our world shift from enslavement to galactic involvement, as well as current intel on any blockages impeding us from our sovereign birthright. Knowledge and self-mastery are key at this time. Our commitment is to present you with the latest breaking conspiratorial articles, off-world messages, exopolitics, cutting-edge technologies and sciences, and also an ever-significant intertwining of spiritual support and metaphysical scope that one needs to dive down the rabbit hole in search for truth with balance. We are truly on the horizon of a new golden age filled with the promise for more love, worldwide peace, and accelerated intuitive skills, where every living being can exist in cohesion and abundance. It is whatever we envision and dream this new world to be. I say to you now, let's redefine the new world to the beginnings of our own precious heaven on earth. Galactic Connection is here to provide the pulse of Mother Earth through an eclectic range of interviews each Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Station 2 on BBS Radio, expanding your perspectives on how we can once and for all take back our freedoms, our joy, and our connection with our mighty I Am presence. Our intention remains true to connect hearts and minds everywhere in order to obtain global unity and galactic and universal acceptance. Our discussions will continue to cover anything to do with galactic society and our involvement with our galactic brothers and sisters. Our guests are experts in their fields, and our radio shows have been coined as some of the most thought-provoking out there. In addition to our daily blog, which runs 365 days a year, we also offer a realm of healing services such as our world-renowned implant removal processes, our spiritual past life clearings, our galactic violet ray alchemy from Alexandra, who shares in the lineage of Merlin, and other cutting-edge healing technologies. Check our site out at galacticconnection.com now, sending you a wave of light, love, and inspiration, and a personal hug and thank you for listening to our Galactic Connection radio show and visiting our blog today. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alexandra Metters from galacticconnection.com, and today is March 11th, 2014. I have with me a very wonderful guest, Michael Elejan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, Michael.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Cosmic French, Elejan.
Awesome. And I want to introduce him. He's got a very interesting background. He has a very conscious memory of being aboard a Starship after a very major fall from an oceanside pier, and grew up with a family very cool. He used to help his father design and invent Parasails. And his father was even a professional stage hypnotist and was a follower, great advocate of channeling guru Edgar Cayce. And anyway, so because of that, he showed some very strong signs of being a good channeler, and his father decided to work with him and develop his channeling abilities, which has created him into the very strong channeler he is today. He was physically beamed aboard the ship, and apparently they saved his life, and he says unfortunately he had to return back to planet Earth to finish his mission, and was activated as a direct voice channel for the spiritual hierarchy, which I definitely want to talk to you about that. And he now does exclusively readings for the light workers and the star people. So he also does talks and speaks in front of the universities and churches and centers throughout the United States and Great Britain, and has really the major mission of just assisting finishing up the planetary ascension process and bringing forth the golden age. Done a great deal of work with all of the ground crew. I must commend you, Michael, because I hear great comments about other people that have received readings with you. So welcome. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here and a chance to connect with more of our ground crew, as our friends upstairs like to refer to those of us.
Yes. And so tell us a little bit about, let's just start with, where are you today? What are you doing today that you maybe weren't doing back when you wrote the book, Prepare for the Landings?
Well, I'm doing what I'm still doing, but I've been doing since 1979, are these transformational channel readings for fellow Lightworker star people. I do live in a different location with my girlfriend, Laura Legere. In fact, I recommend people check out her website. It's notweirdanymore.com. She wrote a book called It's Not Weird Anymore. And we've been together since for the last 2.5 years. It's been a very interesting experience, and a lot of, interesting how we meet people, and they've had indirectly, in a sense, directly, of course, as the ground crew members do, interaction with extraterrestrial, with the Galactic fleet. And, but for me, it's kind of, we're getting close to a goal that I've known from the time I was born, because I didn't come into this life with the cosmic amnesia veils over my mind. And I knew as a child I was going to publish a book. I knew the title of it, Prepare for the Landings. I knew the basic information in it. But I knew I could not publish the book until at least several years before the events described in the book were going to take place. And I published it in early 2009. Now, it is my perception, that's we're in 2014, that we are in a new timeline. That's how I'm going to describe it. From the old timeline, only about a third of humanity survived through the changes. Well, in this timeline, new one, and I kind of explain this to the people I connect with, and I know that, Alexandra, you're connected with this group, and Cobra, and all these different people that are, up on the front lines, so to speak, taking a lot of flack from the, doing what we're supposed to do.
Oh, yes.
There's a group of those of us, this is how I explain it, because I've met actual time travelers like Andrew Bouchard and various people who were part of Black Op, crude time travel stuff compared to consciousness time travel, that a group of us are from the future, our oversoul future self, projected into the past, present timeline, and we created a different outcome. So instead of only a third of humanity surviving, we now realize about at least 90 to 95% of humanity is going to make it through. But what our real desire in the last few years has been to help the other 5 or 10%, minus the 1% of the cabal. They can get out of the way. Quickly, too, I might add. And so we can help, because these ones would have to come back from 100,000 years of karmic cycle. But we didn't want that. We wanted everyone, if possible, to make it through. And there are a number of people who wouldn't make it through if it wasn't for some of us acting, and this has come through the sessions a lot, the transformational channel readings. A lot of us are acting as surrogates, meaning that we're taking on some of the other people who have so much on their plate and so overloaded that they couldn't even hope to take on some of the emotional stuff. Not that they don't want to, but it's just so much of the masses of humanity have been bogged down because of what the cabal did. And as the masters say, none of us are victims, but that doesn't mean we haven't been victimized.
Yes, and I so agree with that regarding the surrogates, because I think we all have kind of run the course. We're getting to that end of the road where we're just so exhausted. If you talk to the average so-called light worker, I typically call them emissaries of light, they say to you over and over again, oh my God, I feel like I'm carrying a million souls.
Yeah. Well, we run the gamut, as the saying goes. Extended our tour of duty. Because we do get hazardous duty pay. Purple Heart, Halo, and Wings kind of is how I look at it. Yeah, as long as we keep our sense of humor intact. And see, Cabal tried to off me a lot of times. I mean, seriously. They did, because I was exposing things for years. My girlfriend Laura and I call ourselves conspiracy optimists. Because we know about the, quote, cover-up conspiracy, quote, unquote, but we also know that there's been a cosmic sting operation. Yeah. And when I actually, back in 1973, when I saw the movie The Sting, Paul Newman, Robert Redford movie, and Ashtar is always commenting to me about various things, and he has quite a dry sense of humor, as serious and as deadly serious as he is about getting the cabal out of the way and liberating the planet. And he made a comment to me right after I saw that movie. He goes, we have a cosmic sting operation ongoing to oust the cabal. And, of course, he was referring to both a financial thing as well as a number of other things that has been ongoing behind the scenes.
Definitely.
So lately, and there's some information I can kind of lay on you and the audience that to me is very relevant, what has been going on behind the scenes, even though there's a lot of things classified. And I don't use that as the intelligence or unintelligence agencies on planet Earth use that term. Like there's Homeland Insecurity and all these various titles I give these very affectionately to the Earth, shall I call it, agencies who thrive on paranoia, fear, which is false evidence appearing real, and the things they do, they can't handle the light coming in. So as we keep, as the ground crew, cosmic cleanup crew, we're grounding a lot of light here. with the galactic fleets bombard and the light from the great central sun. As Cobra has talked about it, about the event coming up, and I mentioned this to you before, that the energy that he's talking about that's about to come in huge constant, like somebody turns the faucet on. It's been turning on a little twinkle. It's been a few drops. Energy that the Elohim have never experienced that have suddenly manifested in the universe. It's already hitting the planet. But when they open up the faucet, so to speak, and they really, open it up, it's going to come in a concentrated form that's going to just totally discombobulate all last vestiges of the cabal once and for all the way.
Fantastic.
So I'm very excited about that. And that's just it's just around the corner here, any moment, any day, any week.
Are you in agreement that this is sometime between now and March 20th? Because that seems to be coming through a lot of different places.
Well, having been in years past through a few what I call dry run scenarios where, there was a hope and the kind of evidence that verified, quote, it was going to happen. Under any other sort of circumstances, when I had those kinds of things, everything always happened. But when it came down to something that would change reality as we've known it, like the RV disclosure, or they get the cosmic green light to come down and the event where the energy hits the planet, those kinds of things, when you try to predict ahead of time, even when you sincerely have a sense of a feeling and knowing that, this is going to happen, because it is ultimately going to happen. It's just that your desire and your yearning to have it happen so much is that and then when it doesn't happen, even all these confirming kinds of things, because it is of such a nature, it is so dramatic and so mind-blowingly reality-changing that there has to be a larger number of humanity a little more ready to receive that kind of change than just a few of us, see? Yeah. So we learn to not to be, not to have so much haste to return to the higher realms.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I've struggled my entire life because when I was born, I didn't come with the cosmic amnesia veils. So you can imagine, I've compared so many things with the Earth level all my life, and I've struggled. I jokingly say I have to wear gravity boots to hold myself down. I just float off the planet. So the closest I can get to the higher realms is do this kind of work. I call it work, but it's actually labor of love. It's my passion. It's my joy to be a cosmic telephone line and help give all the rest of the ground crew members that I have time, because my schedule being pretty intense, and with my girlfriend and what we're doing, I try to arrange for at least one session a day out of all the other busy schedule, because this is my passion. This is what I enjoy doing, and meeting other ground crew members and being able to give them kind of a cosmic heads up, kind of a cosmic pep talk a little bit, because I get so many of the volunteer star people who really have expressed to me a feeling like, did I get off course? This is what they're saying to me, did I screw up my mission? Did I get off course to a point that, and the higher forces are extremely compassionate. They're not negatively judging. Well, they just want us to be the best we can. So one day when we're standing before the councils and we're looking back, there won't be any regret of, God, I messed up down there. I hate that when that happens. I screwed it up. Man, I hate that happens. So it's being able to give them a confirmation that you are where you're supposed to be right now. That yes, we're in a little holding pattern, but how can I effectively, right in the here and now, what can I do to make my mission a little more temporarily, feel like I've accomplished a little bit more? A lot of the time, what these sessions do is help to kind of give a confirmation of the fact that they're on a mission and they haven't been forgotten. Sometimes, light workers, when they haven't connected with others, they feel kind of alone when really, their higher forces are watching their backside. And I can say that firsthand from my physical contacts.
Big time.
Yeah, and to know that our cosmic extended family, our star family, our friends upstairs, are watching over, and then they have their things, they're going about doing their duties, but the ship's consciousness computer hooked into the Godhead, the Merkaba, are overshadowing in less than a millionth of a second. They have to move the person out of the way or whatever, but they will do that. They don't make it too easy, because if we aren't forced to flex our muscles a little bit, like an aerobic workout, then we get a little lazy, maybe. But, they're working as the cosmic backup team to make sure we get through this relatively feeling, so we can accomplish all we can and salvage all the souls so that, that as much of humanity can make it through.
So, Michael, why do you feel that there are more whistleblowers out there today, as well as more workers for the light, that are effectively finishing their missions or performing their missions without that constant threat of their life, like, say, 10 years ago? What's the difference?
I will tell you a personal experience I had. And by the way, it is, Archangel Michael told me a while back, when I started meeting back in the 80s and during the 90s, I would estimate probably 200 to 300 of these former Block Ops. Some of them were still in these alphabet soup agencies like the NSA, CIA, and so on, long before Edward Snowden recently came out. I was hearing the same, way beyond anything he shared already, even though there's stuff he's starting to release about extraterrestrial stuff at this time. I met these guys, and the interesting thing is, they would come up to me after a workshop, an event, and they would come up and they look me right in the eye. And, when you're meeting these guys, you can tell they're from intense levels of, these black op kinds of. But there's something about these particular ones that would show up at my events that I knew was if they were fellow volunteers. And Archangel Michael said to me, and on cosmic spiritual espionage missions of light, secret agents of gods, goddesses who came down, infiltrate the dark side, and become a whistleblower. That was their job, to expose the whole cabal, break it apart by exposing. And enough of them would do it. Even though a lot of them were off, there were many that survived. And they would change their identities or whatever. I heard incredible stories. And a lot of what they would do is, after they would listen to my workshop, they'd come at me afterwards and say, everything you said is right on. When I get stuff through channeling, they say, I've got the documentation to verify it. And they sit down with me and share these stories with me. Some of them were part of recovery teams, or some of the craft on like the Merkabah that weren't as advanced that we crashed, or they were part of like time travelers like Ender Bishargo, who were in these top, black op, agencies, top secret projects, mind control, intel, all this stuff that, my friends told me all about it. And then as an early age, they had me start reading stuff on the Illuminati just so I would know who I would be dealing with. I knew before I came in, but it was kind of like review. This is like spiritual boot camp, toughen up. Yeah, you're in the, the final trenches before the earth is liberated. So you got to know who you're dealing with. And it's not that, as Astro says, it's not that we can't forgive them. We just can't let them run ripshod any longer over humanity. So tough love, and so I didn't hate them. And that guy had no fear. Because even if they tried to off me, I knew where I was going to go back to. In fact, I tell people this, one thing I'm missing is all the great parties and these light clubs. They have great light clubs up there. Oh, my God. Parties I'm missing down. Well, I've been down here, but, I'm on a mission. So, but going back to a personal experience, and even the experience I had in, that's even before the experience in 79 when the cabal offed me briefly. I got hit with a psychotronic beam. They ripped the life force out of my body. Now, it was a terrifying moment to have this beam come into me, but I'm still very detached in a way because not having been born with the veils, my physiological sense of being connected with the other realms gave me, and the interactions with my friends coming around me all the time, gave me a different kind of not being caught in the fear aspect as the average person who would be hit with something exotic weapon system like this. There's different types of those. And I knew I was dying, and I fell unconscious. And next thing was waking up on the ship, the Merkabah, with the 4 beings dressed in blue metallic suits standing around me, the Elohim, putting the life force back in my body, altering my DNA, RNA, so I wouldn't be vulnerable to that kind of attack. But then it became clear to me, as one of the beings named Corton, who is an Ashtar command as a communications technician, who's been overshadowing all my channeling classes. And by the way, I do want to mention a couple times during our interview that I have a couple workshops coming up. Some people might want to fly in or experience it. I'm doing one here in Seattle, Washington, at my girlfriend's and my place here, and also I'm doing one in Virginia. The first one I'm doing is in April 26th, which is a Saturday. It's 2 different workshops, 3 hours each. One is called The Who's Who in the Cosmic Directory, because you want to know who's who in the higher realms. And I show I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation. They're based on these beautiful paintings by a very famous clairvoyant artist named Slay Winkler, painted them. And then in the 3 hours in the afternoon, from 2 to 5, I'm doing a channeling workshop, teaching people how to communicate clearly. And I'm repeating that next month in May in Virginia. I don't have that information in front of me. It's at the last part of the month in May. I'm going to be there visiting my girlfriend's mother. I'm going to be staying there for a week or 2. Anyway, but I just wanted people to know I'm doing workshops that are coming up.
That sounds great, Michael. Well, why do you feel that you were born without the cosmic amnesia?
Well, it's not normally allowed, and I'll tell you one of the reasons is when you're aware of who you are. Now, I've always been a spiritual warrior, Archangel Michael, and taking on the dark side. And in the sense that, one of the problems is as I was consciously aware, I started to be attacked by, let's just say, demonic energies. Who wanted to take me out. Or if it wasn't them, it was later on, it was the military-industrial complex, the Cabal, the Illuminati that I got. It was very obvious because I knew, long before, since the 50s, the NSA has been monitoring phone conversations. People act like it's something new. Well, it's been around ever since there's been the NSA and the National Security State. I tell people, look, there's no secrets in the universe. To me, it's the moral of the story. If they want to listen, fine. Just don't pretend that you're not, and you really are, kind of. So, to me, I actually, after a while, when I came back from 79, after they beamed me back to Earth, I was a real thorn in the ball's side because not only did I not have fear before, now it was like, okay, now I'm going to have fun with their brains a little bit. I'm going to let them know I know they know that I know, and I realized I was recruiting. I actually helped. I'm told a lot of these agents who eventually became whistleblowers, by saying things over the phone to let them know that I know that they having a good sense of humor. I freaked them out because I'd say things. And then something would happen, or I would say something that they figured was classified, nobody would know about it, and my friends are always throwing down little deuces that would let them know about this. Like, back off, you're not going to off the divine emissaries. In fact, when I came back to the experience in 79, I said something over the phone about that let the Cabal know, and they took it very seriously, because they obviously took it seriously. They've been monitoring me, and later I had my phone calls and emails screwed with. And at that point, I thought, wow, if I'm not much of a threat, I must be doing something right. So I appreciate their tender, loving care. They'd go out of their way to target me. And, they didn't know what to do with me, because I don't react in the sense of fear, or I just feel like, oh, God, here they go again. But thank you for your confirmation. I appreciate your validation of my mission. This is really wonderful. I appreciate it so much. Anyway.
I can so relate to that, Michael. I did that all year last year. Just constantly.
So to me, I saw myself would be recruiting them for the light, even though they were programmed. And these were ones that Archangel Michael, I said earlier, were on undercover agents of light, infiltrating the dark side. Now, that can be any level of the government or military, up to the presidency even. And people often judge people like, oh, that person's dark, or they're wearing two hats, blah, 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 and they judge somebody. They have no idea some people who they might judge as negative might actually be of the light, who is actually, if you go back to the 50s when FBI agents would infiltrate the mafia, and they had to do things to make it look like they were, quote, on their, with them, when they were really doing things to get their confidence that they could then expose them. And of course the FBI, like any agency, have their corrupt side too. But I'm just saying there has always been, in the sense of the earth, there's this kind of espionage thing of undermining the dark by bringing light and and exposing the truth, like Edward Snowden did on a public level, openly and overtly, for people I've heard years ago telling me about things. And so there are things you do to your computer, like put programs like Linux on, so you're not going to be screwed with so much. It's very difficult for them to have. That's what Edward Snowden had on his computer, the Linux system. Right. So I recently connected with somebody who knew Edward Snowden, who, I explained all this, that, there's things you can do to make it a little more secure. It's not, because it's no secrets. It's not a paranoid thing with me. It's just like, hey, I like to not feel like somebody's watching me all the time. It's just kind of a thing of feeling a little more, because I'm a sovereign being, and I like to kind of come from that space. But
well, you know what I was going to say? I used to be in the computer industry, and I learned long ago that Linux is the only system that you typically won't find any viruses targeting that.
Right.
And that's why it's one of the better frameworks to work off of. I wanted to ask you before you go on, you brought up psychotronic light beaming, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you feel that that's the same type of technology they're using to off all of these bankers?
Yeah, very similar.
Okay.
There's different types of that. And the difference was, now, I experienced firsthand dying. They ripped the life force out of my body, but my mission wasn't over, see?
Yeah,
and I
obviously.
kind of relate to, not the remake, because I think it was a nasty movie, but the original Day the Earth Stood Still. Back in 1950, when Michael Rainey played the Space Brother Clantu, he got killed and the robot took it and brought him back to life. So I can say that in the movie, that original line, not the remake, which was that I can relate to dying and coming back because my mission wasn't over. Plus, it was to say to the cupola, you're not going to off the divine emissaries anymore. And this is the message I want to give to the ground crew out there. Because a lot of people have just recently woke up. There was always the two camps between the conspiracy group that thought all of those people involved in the ET stuff, woo-woo, whatever. Then there's the kind of camp that doesn't want to relate to the conspiracy stuff. Well, I was always trying to bring them together to kind of bring a balance and to say, look, this is important information, not to be caught in fear or paranoia, because we've got a cosmic backup team out there, but to be able to empower ourselves with truth, because we can't put our head in the sand and pretend and say, oh, you're being negative and all this stuff. I mean, to me, being negative can be being in denial, like there's not just the river in Egypt, as the saying goes, but as a conspiracy optimist, it was to be able to say, hey, this stuff's going on, but here's the solution. This is, we've not only got a backup team, but there's new activations, and our bodies are changing from crystalline to the Advent-Cadman blueprint, as the masters say, from the carbon base to the crystal, that we are becoming immune more and more now, whether it be this chemtrail crap in the sky, because the Galactic Federation is cleaning up the mess up there, and we're doing things also. So it's a combination of being more proactive, and I find these sessions that I do for the fellow star beings, light workers in Earth embodiment, and I really welcome people to go to my website, michaelelajan.com, check out the NASA Star People characteristic list, and see how many of those traits that you can relate to. And there's a huge, several to a third is kind of the average number. There's a few might have a few less because there's been a lot of numbing-dumbing effect. And then there's some with more. With me, when I first heard about this list, was actually during my second physical contact when I met Corton on the ship, as I mentioned earlier. And he told me, from now on, unlike the old karmic stuff, I was going to run from now on, the sessions would be these transformational sessions for fellow volunteers, where I was going to download what is called these higher light encodements. Now, this is very interesting because having gone through this horrendous experience of dying, when they altered my DNA RNA to make me impervious to the Cabal type of attack, it did something else. Because if you think about the ancient mystery school initiations that were make it or break it, too, by the way. You either lived or you didn't live. It was not much in between. Not very many survived through some of those initiations. Well, now they were telling me that my DNA RNA was going to be able to channel these unique encodements that are unique to each light worker, even though there's still an overlapping effect to influence people indirectly in a good way. It's focused on each light worker. It's tailored to each person for a body, mind, spirit, emotional integration to enhance and maximize. It's not just the session when you have it, it's playing back the CD dozens of times and getting more juice out of it, is the way I describe it. And the word they always use is proportionate, because if you sit back on your hunches and do nothing, not much will come out of it, based on the God helps us that helps themselves principle. That what they're trying to do, because they don't want to force help down our throats, is to maximize and energetically speed up your potential so you can tap into things you probably would have tapped into, but be able to access it a little easier, a little more energetically. So every time you play back the CD of the recording of the session, more than just the initial session, it starts to activate those aspects of DNA, RNA, and you were also mentioning to me, Alexandra, the other day about implant removal. Yeah, and it's my understanding that this will help neutralize. I did a reading for a woman many years ago who has been living near Dulce base, near the Dulce corner. There was an underground base that has recently been taken out, 2011, when the higher forces intervened and took out most of the big bases from underground. Okay.
Do you agree that all the underground bases are clear now?
All the big ones, except there may be a few ones like Jesse Ventura's conspiracy program, where he talks about these huge, like 60,000 square feet homes, where they're, are these underground places that are small compared to the big bases, where a few power elite people thought they could run, but they can't hide.
Correct. Yeah.
And those few are still existing because they think that somehow they're going to be immune, but they have to face accountability. We can forgive them, but hey, they still feel. So the big bases, yeah, they've all been removed. And Dulce base has primarily been, taken back by the light. But she was living there, and I did a session for her, and the impact got blown out of her nose, literally, in that case. I did actually photographed it, and it started disintegrating, but it was this little weird kind of thing. It came out of her nose. It was kind of interesting. And she suddenly became really empowered right after that, and because she had been abducted before that. So it helped her regain her sovereignty. It just helped her. It was her desire was to do it, but she didn't know what to do about the feeling that she was being controlled so much. and there's a lot of the abductees. Most of the abduction stuff is really black engineered. They created these gray entities based on taking the Zeta Reticuli and putting a spin on it to try to create an invasion scenario, which is not going to be allowed. But this was the Cabal's attempt until recently when they took out most of the black anti-gravity fleet that Gary McKinnon talked about, when they were secretly colonizing the moon and Mars. And then it's interesting, I just want to make a comment that a lot of the Galactic Federation's now coming down, like over to Ukraine. I saw this video, and there's been a few triangular ships. A few of them are working, but they're not being used by the Cabal really as they used to be trying, because if you look through night vision goggles, you can see some battles going on where in a few years ago, and now it's not happening really, where the Federation finally cleansed the heavens, as it was biblically prophesied. And there's a big mothership that's not, the government, they planned to build some really large things, and somebody was trying to interpret this gigantic cigar ship as Earth-based. Now, that was a Galactic Federation ship down, showing themselves a little more openly as they're gearing up now for, being every eye will behold them when they finally decloak and they get the cosmic green light to come down.
Well, let's back up a little bit here. Let's start with the, you often make reference to the Elohim. Clarify for the audience who you consider the Elohim to be.
Well, in a traditional, more biblical sense, it's the creator gods and goddesses. Okay, a male and female aspect. But there's levels of Elohim too, just like there's levels. And Ashtar is an Elohim, but a lot of people think of Elohim more as kind of etherical, kind of angelic type beings, but to me they are creator God beings who are very much connected with divine creation, but they use consciousness technology not because they're limited or dependent on it. They use it to enhance their own natural universal capacities and powers. It's like they don't need ships to travel, but when groups of them are traveling around, hanging out together, they create a Merkabah, manifest a light field. It becomes a light ship. For, a whole group of them, millions of them can travel intact as almost like merge their consciousness together in that kind of state.
Wow, that's fascinating. Now, how do you differentiate the Elohim with, for example, you're one of the few people I've seen that's made reference to the Guardians. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, again, a lot of these terms are really referencing the same beings, but using different terminology. Some of them may be the same beings or aspects or levels of the difference than, say, another level. And I hate to use, even the word spiritual hierarchy, I use that word, but I explain to people, unlike a military hierarchy or hierarchy on Earth like the Illuminati hierarchy of the pyramid kind of thing that was, they took something beautiful and they twisted it around the term, put a spin on it like they always do.
Yeah.
In this case, it's levels of responsibility. It doesn't mean one being's better than, or it doesn't mean, it just means they have a level of responsibility because they have an ability and capacity, unique as their personality is, to encompass, to utilize, to manifest, activate, whatever they want to do that allows them to operate at that energetic power level.
I'm so glad you brought that up because that was one of my questions, because there's so much, argument about hierarchy, spiritual hierarchy. Now, how would you respond to someone who says, well, I don't believe in Ashtar because anybody who's of a spiritual nature is not going to call himself Lord Ashtar?
Well, first of all, or let's say Lady Kuan Yin. Let's use that. Now, somehow the goddesses, that's okay to use the word lady, but Lord, it's not like, it's a title, it's a titlement of spiritual responsibility. They're not attached to these things. Commander Ashtar, Lord Ashtar, or Lady Athena, or Lady whatever. These are just kind of spiritual levels of responsibility that kind of, not really have admirals, they have commanders, captains, and so on, but it's not like a military, even Star Trek, as much as it is closer to the reality, there's still some human mundane projections through some of the stuff, episodes that I watched, because it's really close to, because actually Gene Roddenberry never actually came up with it. He actually got the idea from a famous contactee named Jacques Riviere, who I met in the early 80s when I moved to Phoenix for a while, and he was a flight sergeant during World War II and had contact with the human-appearing beings. And so he shares all this in metaphysical meetings in the late 50s, early 60s, and next thing you know, here's Star Trek coming on based on the stuff that Jacques Riviere was sharing. Gene Roddenberry took credit for it, never gave Jacques Riviere any credit.
Wow.
So it's interesting. And Gene Roddenberry also used a couple channels to continue updating. In 1979, I experienced the holodeck in the sense that they projected holographic images around me. They were more real, or as real as the physical reality around me. And I thought, they're finally getting help. They're finally updating it to much closer to the Merkabah technology that actually exists. So that's just,
Well, it's you're talking probably to the majority of the people listening. We're all like Star Trek fans, most of us, And don't you feel that whole Star Trek episode and series was divinely guided to be released at that time?
In fact, there was an incident. Well, William Shatner, when the first Star Trek, he got lost. He was on a motorcycle. He got lost from the filming crew, and he didn't know where he was. And all of a sudden, the light ship came down, hovered, and guided him to go back where they were filming.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I just know all these stories. Like Jimi Hendrix had 3 UFO sightings when he was alive. And there was most of the, people who have been on cutting edge in some way often have interaction. They don't always talk about it openly, but there's this, a strong connection when people have UFO sightings, unlike these so-called professional UFO investigators. Mm-hmm. It's not an accident that that we call it a UFO. I call them an IFO, identified. But they're there re-showing themselves as a visual reference point to remind them, hey, we're up here, we're watching your backside, and ultimately at some point we're going to have open physical contact when the time is when enough people wake up. That's going to happen. One of the experiences I could share, which is quite interesting, I published a book called Prepare for the Landings. And when I was on the Coast to Coast show, George Norrie's Coast to Coast show in 2011, January 19th, and it was kind of interesting how it happened to get on that show, just like an opening kind of available when I contacted you, because it was difficult getting a hold of you, and then suddenly it all fell into place.
Right.
So it was very hard to get on that show. It takes months sometimes, and all of a sudden this opening a week later was available. So I'm on the show, and I can tell how many thousands of people contacted me afterwards. Well, one of the people contacted me, Lance Campbell, who's a trucker out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And he's driving his rig along, and he in 2010, he started getting in contact telepathic with a group of light beings who came down on their rainbow ship and hovered over his truck. And some of them were 1,000 feet across. In fact, they would come down so close, you could see him waving at him through the windows. Okay?
Oh my God.
And he started getting them to do yes and no responses, where they would go up and down for yes or side by side for no. And so he asked him things that he could verify, and they were able to respond. And then he started asking questions about, George Norrie's a pretty dedicated person. But the problem is that most of the UFO guests he's had are mostly researchers, not contact. He's had a few, like James Gillian and me and a couple others, but it's mostly researchers. And so, but anyway, and having been in the UFO community for years and watching what I consider a lot of disinformation when they make it a big mystery or scary rather than uplifting and empowering, like the contactees in the 50s, like Georgia Dempsey, George Van Tassel, who I actually knew before he was physically taken off the planet. These people who were the pioneers, excuse me. And there was this whole disinformation attempt to debunk and ridicule the contactees while trying to stuff the graves down our throats and talk about negative things. That was the agenda. The UFO movement got infiltrated by a huge number of, people from the alphabet soup agencies. But anyway, so he's asking them upstairs when these different guests would come on. He said, should I? And he'd get a yes and no response. He asked her telepathically, said, should I listen to this guest? And he's driving his truck and ship's flight there. They'd usually say no. Like, there's nothing you're going to learn from this, or it's disinformation. So on the night of January 19, 2011, and he hears me talking about my book and my Transformational channel readings, he gets really excited. And the ship's right there hovering, and he said, should I listen? Should I believe, me? And he said they went up and down very vigorously as a yes answer. And I said to him, well, nothing like getting a cosmic kosher stamp of approval.
No kidding.
Okay? Now, the only other author that I know of who ever got that kind of, and that was even way more dramatic even than mine, was Tuella, who was a famous channel and contactee. And in 1982, she published a book called Project World Evacuation by the Ashtar Command. Before she published it, and she went out, and 3 nights consecutive, a big mothership came down, huge, on the horizon, and hovered there as reference to the 3 waves or 3 massive manifestations of light ships that when they eventually do it. So they appeared that way over 3 nights to verify what was in the book, physically making the ship appear. That was the only other author that I know of who ever got that kind of cosmic kosher stamp of approval or confirmation. And so, just I knew I was going to share this experience later. Now, what's interesting, taking it a step further, and I ended up doing a transformational channel reading for him. And he got back with me like so many people do. In fact, on my website, michaelelijon.com, in the posting, I think it's the blog section, or maybe one of the testimonial section, I mentioned about his experience after he had it. And he said, as I had shared with him, how he would play it back, and all these things started popping up that he hadn't heard originally. Because they actually told me, when I asked him upstairs about, what's the deal with that? And they said, well, we've layered. That was the word they said. They layer energetically stuff in the recording so it would pop up later according to, transformations that people go through. Well, anyway, last year, I think it was the beginning of 2013, I just heard about the new NSA center there in Salt Lake City, which is near where he lives. And often I'll call him, and calling him, all of a sudden ship will come down, and he'll hover. In this case, I called him up and was talking to him, and I mentioned the NSA center. And he goes, oh, and he's driving his truck at the moment I'm talking to him. He said, oh, the ship just came down over the NSA center. Now, they were building it at the time, and it was supposed to be towards June or July they were going to finish. This center was supposed to be able to break into algorithmic codes and everything that would take thousands of years or whatever by the normal system that they were using. I get the message telepathically. And if they were going to screw with it, they were going to block them from completing that. Well, sure enough, the months go by. Finally, several months ago, the information came out that 13 times the NSA tried to finish building, 13 times all the wiring got burned out. What they do is
number, huh?
Yeah, they let them replace it, burned it out again. Each time they did build a little bit more. They burned it out. It's like, what about the word no, don't you understand?
Yeah.
But it's just interesting. I get these kind of, now they said, well, it'll be at least a year before, they'll never get it.
I remember blogging an article about that. That's pretty interesting. Well, Now, Michael, clarify for me, what are the different councils out there that are communicating with the ground crew? Can you give us an idea? Because we've heard interdimensional, we've heard interplanetary, we've heard intergalactic.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting, and I know there was a little bit of, let's just say, there was some information that came out. Somebody tried to infer that the Galactic Federation was different than the Galactic Federation of Light. Well, I have a little bit of, I remember Twella talking about this in one of her books. It was actually titled Ashtar, with his famous painting that Slade Winkler painted of him with his helmet on in the front cover. And she listed a dozen to 2 dozen from the Confederation, Federation, Intergalactic. There was like 2 dozen different designations very similar to the same organization or aspects of a smaller or bigger part of the earth. And so this pettiness about, this is not the same as the other, it's just all nonsense. People engage, and so there's many councils, like, the Ashtar Command is one of the major commands, as well as the Jerusalem Command that Dr. Hertek talks about in the Book of Knowledge. And when I was taken aboard the first time at 6 years of age, when I fell off the Oceanside Pier in a very terrifying fall, which was written into my life script, just like the second experience, I was taken aboard by being named Orion, part of the Orion Council of Light. That's a major part of the Jerusalem Command, and they work with the Ashtar Command. In fact, when I was getting ready to be beamed back down to Earth, Orion says to me, and I didn't want to come back. I wanted to hang up there. Oh, my God. It was like, and I can't tell people how long because there's no time. Time doesn't exist on that level. All I know it wasn't as long as I was hoping. And he says to me, oh, by the way, you're about to reconnect with an old friend of ours, Ashtar. Well,
cool.
And 3 years later, when I was sitting in front of the little black and white TV and there in Vista, California, listening to President Kennedy's news conference on the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of a sudden Ashtar pops into the room. That was when I reconnected with him, since hanging out with him in the councils up there. And he's standing there, and he's etheric, but he looked more real than most of the mundane humans.
Yeah.
So walking around. And his first words to me telepathically were, he goes, we're not going to allow nuclear war. It's against Federation policy. And my response was kind of like, cool. I mean, it was like officially announcing, and I knew that one day I'd be openly sharing. So I was able to put in my book that incident, and he told me how they were coming down over military bases and shutting down all the missiles. Now, of course, years later, all these retired guys talking about in Disclosure, Stephen Greer's Disclosure, talking about how when they were much younger, They had, remember, when they were stationed at various military bases, watching UFOs come down and shut down all the missiles. They get all these confirmations years later sometimes of what I was told when I was younger. And then finally, when in 1979, after my second in contact, Ash Turner informed me that he would be one of the main beings coming through me from then on, because he's in charge of Earth missions for the volunteers. That the Astral Command is coordinating with a lot of the other commands and councils and works very closely with the authority to invoke divine intervention. Of course, in the old timeline, up until a few years ago, it was in a world emergency evacuation that's now become an open first contact scenario. That's where it changed from my book, because it was mostly focused on more of an evacuation kind of thing. But now it is open contact that's going to happen. That is, of course, going to be the byproduct. You know, to me, well, there's a lot of things I can talk about. But anyway, as far as the councils...
Wait. So are you saying that the Ashtar Command is primarily involved in the disclosure, and how is that different than the Jerusalem Command?
Well, no, I see them working very similar.
Okay.
They may have a different kind of... You know, we're all a unique personality. So every organization has a little bit variance, but they overlap. They self-help each other. They're very, very cooperative, service to collective. They don't have all these petty political differences. You know, even those of us who are ground crew members now, we're usually team members of councils up there many times over, honorary members. Many times Astra will come through me and go, you're an honorary member of my command. Many of us are honorary members of many commands and councils, because we played roles of service to help various systems, not because we had to, but because we wanted to, because it was a wonderful joy to connect in fellowship with another group, another command, and so we developed a friendship, and we would take on honorary membership.
Is that typically within the solar system, or where do you see that unfolding? I mean,
for example, well, I'll tell you one thing. Now, for example, Commander Monka, also known as Kader Monka. There's been some changes recently, but he has represented Earth in the Saturn Tribunal Council, as well as a being named Sutko has represented the Saturn Council in the Galactic Council for many years. Now, there's been a shift recently. I'm trying to remember who. Yeah, I think somebody else has kind of taken over a little bit. But for many, many ages, or for many years, Kadar is an honorary title, and for, a level of responsibility, because Earth doesn't, other than the Hollow Earth. Now, the Inner Earth civilization represents as an honorary, as a membership in the Federation. It's the outer Earth surface that has been culturally quarantined. Because of the warlike nature and the Cabal having controlled the outer surface so much of that. So there's been a shift now as they're about to lift the planetary quarantine officially, and so many of us will begin to reassume the roles that we were before we came into human embodiment once we get a little cosmic R&R coming up here shortly.
Michael, just so you know, Cobra just released his Quarantine Earth Endgame post. Have you read that yet?
No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, it's apparently the information's coming out that it's any time. So, good news. Well, now, do you actually agree that the galactic wars themselves, are they all the way up through the 9th dimensional level?
That's an interesting question. As far as war itself, as you think of knockdown, drag-out war, that's only happening up to the lower part of the 5th dimension. But as far as the effects of, energetically, anything we do on Earth is going to impact the other realms. So, maybe in a technical sense, you could say that the war in that sense is affecting it. But as far as direct things blowing up, no, that's not, are things being destroyed? None of that can be destroyed anyway. It's just that the more immediate effect is more centered on the 4th, 3rd dimensional levels and maybe a little bit of the lower 5th. But from then on, I just feel that what we're going through right now, is that and as of 2012, December 21st, and you can look at history, like these energy waves that reach kind of a crest and pause there for a moment, and it crashes down. At the crest of these waves, there's usually a parallel between, I find this in all of my reading sessions, between certain periods of history when certain volunteers came down, and right now at the end of this, the end and the beginning, the alpha and the omega of this cycle, that we reached parallel to some other cycles. And I was told that we not only at the end 3 cycles that rarely ever happen lined up, but a 4th cycle that has never happened in the universe before is lined up with the other 3. And this is related to this new energy that Cobra refers to as the event coming up, that we're getting a little bit, as I said, little hors d'oeuvre, little cosmic hors d'oeuvre. But very soon they're going to turn on the faucet, and we're going to be hit powerfully with a full concentration of the same energy in an overwhelming way that's going to really recalibrate in a more dramatic, sudden way things that we're starting to feel a little bit precursor of.
Okay, now you made a good comment there. They're about to turn it on. What do you feel are the significant issues or tasks that have to be accomplished in order to do that?
Well, there's the things now. I know I'm going to just say whether, on a higher galactic level, and I really see this as true, and it's not a negative disagreement, we all agree on the things that make up divine creation, the sacred principles. But we also have, as we sit around the councils, a little bit of friendly agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons that different channel sources, well, we all agree on the main thing of what's happening, what's going to happen. There's differences of circumstance, timing, and the exact details sometimes vary slightly because various commands, various groups, various contactees have slightly differences of opinion, which is okay. It's not it doesn't have to be a negative ego, disagreement kind of thing. It's just that there are variances. It's just like one of the reasons in this reevaluation of world currency thing seems to be a lot of all these rumors flying around and confusion, partly because the cosmic sting operation is almost over, but not quite. The cosmic chess game is coming to a close. And when you look at a good chess game, the two players, it's obvious there's only a certain number of moves left. The audience may not know it, but the two chess players, all the cabal can do is try to delay the inevitable them losing, because as in chess game, the Federation got their king, so to speak, symbolically. And it was true that many years ago in a way, but they've just had to play out this role as kind of a test for people how to deal with duality. Anyway, so to me, the reevaluation, in a sense, is to get the bad taste out of our mouth from having been an economic servitude usury that the Federal Reserve fiat system had us in for a long time. Now, as this new system is, by the way, I will just mention this. I know this from a few sources, and this is nothing to be afraid of because it just shows me confirmation that it's actually happening. There was some intel, and I don't agree on everything because some of it could be disinformation, but on the NASAR website, there was a notice about the IRS basically being disbanded.
Yes, I just blogged that a couple days ago. Yep.
Well, the White Dragon Society supposedly just purchased the Federal Reserve to get them out of the way. Well, that's going to drag the IRS along with it in a way because they're the Gestapo, collection agency in a way.
Of course.
Now, I just heard that a few people have suddenly had their bank accounts, lien has been put on it. Why? People that would normally not experience it. Well, the IRS is desperate because they literally are. This was a confirmation to me. They're so desperate they run out of money. So they're desperately in a wild kind of frenzy trying to lash out in some survival kind of mode to grab money wherever they can. Now, let's use our common sense. Let's not fly off of it. But my recommendation is, other than a little bit, and this is nothing to be afraid about, because as others have talked about, when this change happens here shortly, yes, the banks are going to be shut down. It could happen any day now. I don't know when, but it's coming up very close.
Yeah,
to put liens, and this is interesting. The IRS is flipping out and doing this because they're about literally to be disbanded. So in their death throes, as they try to take control over certain people that they normally wouldn't be so desperate about, because when the bank system closes down temporarily to get rid of the bad guys who that have been trying to make money off the RV and double dipping and all this, so that when they come back online, the new system will not have any of the people who have been corrupt. That's why they've been waiting. That's why it's why it's so long as it is, because they don't want any of the bad guys to make money who've been making like insult on top of injury off everybody suffering. They want us, those who have been, who can use some financial reboot and for humanitarian projects and help a lot of people. Okay, so this is why it's taking a little longer. In fact, I was told recently the word that I was given, well, this sting operation plays out and finally finishes up here shortly. In one sense, when I knew about NASAR over 20 years ago and say, well, people's consciousness aren't quite ready. It's like people who win the lottery and they go back to the same old behavior and they don't help anybody. Now, in the last few years, especially the last few months, I've been tuning in energetically, and I can say that there's quite a few people now starting to get on the same page who can handle having a large amount of money because they're now more clear on their goals, what really counts in life, who they can help, and there's also one or more major trusts besides that are energetically linked indirectly to St. Germain's World Trust that I know about one trust that some people have been who can't quite differentiate between something really authentic because they have some issues about prosperity and they put down something because they think, well, it's too good to be true, it has to be true, it's too good to be true, and they can't differentiate between something really real and something that's make-believe. Because they've been screwed over so many times when something good comes along, the real deal, they put that down also because they've got some emotional issues about having any abundance in their life. So they have to say, oh, no, that's not good, and beware of that person. I'm not going to name who this is, but some people have said some things about me. And there's a certain trust that I feel, and because we actually have talked to the person connected with it, and it's definitely legit. So we have to be careful not to judge people and not project things on others that we have issues with.
I so agree with you, and I'm constantly talking about we are at a phase right now, Michael, where we are being tried and challenged to get an exorbitant amount of data, try to filter through it, try to make sense of it, and try to find some truth in it. And what I'm always saying to people over and over again is it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about picking out the truth in each piece that you read. Not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Right. I say that I use that same phrase. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah. It's like we need to learn. That is more of being a Galactic Society member. Okay? It's not this whole polarization, which is totally a false reality to begin with.
Right. And that's one of the reasons, too, when like this channeling workshop coming up on April 26th, which is a Saturday. I'm doing, as I said, in 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the morning, I'm doing the Who's Who in the Cosmic Directory, which is a PowerPoint presentation showing these beautiful images that a very famous clairvoyant artist named Soleil Winkler painted back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s of these beings. And she actually painted these oil portraits, and I originally did a slideshow where I made them a lot smaller, and then I put them into a PowerPoint presentation. Then in the afternoon, from 2 to 5, I'm doing a workshop called The Dynamics of Cosmic Telepathy, which is based on another book that Tuella, I knew her very well before she was taken off the planet, and how she taught people about channeling. This book was the only book that really described how the brain, the synaptic centers, and how to develop that. And I'm teaching people how to channel, how to interpret the signals clearly, not to misinterpret them. There's a lot of things, dietary, our attitude, asking the higher beings to overshadow us, a lot of things that we combine in that kind of like an energy recipe that creates the right security access code so that you can get clear insights. And there's millions of types of channelings, whether it be, we call it a psychic reading, that's one form. Then there's a more spiritual-oriented thing that help you get insights about how you can improve your mission, how to emphasize the things that will enhance your capacities. They call them the gifts of the spirit, so that one day when we report back to the councils and we're looking back in this final phase, we're not going to look back going, as I said, oh, God, I screwed that up. I hate that when that happens, screw up our mission. But you know what? I really feel, and the higher forces constantly say this, that we need to pat ourselves on the back. We're too harsh with ourselves sometimes, as well as being patty about others. I found in the New Age community a long time ago, I got really tired of like you were just referring to, oh, I'm right, you're wrong. I don't like that. Because there's different variations of the beings themselves agree to disagree, which doesn't make one right and one wrong.
Absolutely.
It's the right to be able, in the council, sit across the council tables in a friendly way, agree to disagree, philosophically, and enjoy being in the presence of another being who has a little different opinion and not be threatened as earth pettiness that has gone on for so long. How we can get along and still have a little disagreement and love each other and get along and really feel that's groovy. This is wonderful that you got a little bit different. You're a unique personality. I'm a unique personality. What we're working for is to find the solutions to the challenge us to make our missions more effective and love each other. Not to say we can't use sometimes tough love if we see, say, somebody getting affected by some negative energy, where there's, and now there was a big cleansing that took place August 22nd, connect with the Whole Earth Network that I have connections with. There was a lot of beings cleansed out of the astral realms, and about 1 million beings went back to the light. Yeah.
Wasn't Catherine May?
Yeah, she's a very clear channel, and
she did an outstanding recording on that. I mean, I think she said something like up to 1 million. 1 million of them were escorted, right?
And Zara and the Whole Earth dude, the being from the Whole Earth, and the Father God energy was coming through, and they were describing this. 1 million beings, almost 1 million, came back to the light. But there were also beings who couldn't bear, who were given the chance to come to the light, but they were so, had done so many evil things that none of them couldn't handle, and they got recycled to the Godhead. And I was told this was going to happen to some beings who were given a chance for on a probationary, but to face their own, now that the sense of conscience had come back to them, that in order to embrace themselves and accept what had happened, it was too much for them. So they got recycled, so to speak. And
well, hey, Michael, you got to answer this question for everybody, okay? Because we want to hear your perspective on this. Now, everybody knows that there's, supposedly some sort of cosmic law for the purpose of intervention, okay? And you yourself had mentioned that, the three things were if we are a threat to ourselves, if we are threatening others, or if we're holding back other worlds from ascension and that kind of thing, then we have the green light to receive intervention. Now, obviously, we've done all three of those.
That's right. We meet all three requirements.
Okay.
So we've but all three.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we've met all three of those requirements. So what the number one question is amongst everybody I've ever talked to is how much more do they need to go for it? Because when you speak with someone like Cobra, for example, he states that because of the complexity of if they move too quickly or too aggressively, then the entire Illuminati or the Jesuits can, blow up, a continent or whatever. And we're not understanding that, wait a minute, you're intervening. You can stop that from happening. We're talking
let me just throw a perspective out about intervention itself.
Okay.
Because, when I was, both of the times, when I was first taken up in 1959 at 6 years of age, when I fell off the Oceanside Pier, and they beamed me physically aboard the ship, and I'm back in my home environment, because, as I said, I wasn't born with the cosmic amnesia veils over my mind, and I didn't want to come back. Of course, I knew I was going to have to. But it was still, I was going to hang on as long as possible. And Orion made it very clear to me, in their physical presence, as they were, and during that experience, they said that this, and also they played back holographic images of the memories, which was also to verify to me it wasn't just my imagination. This was actual memories, holographically. It's like in 79, these holographic images verifying the book of life, as they could refer to it. And he said to me, telepathically, he said that this personal experience of intervention that I was experiencing was a confirmation in the future when there would be mass planetary divine intervention would take place. Okay, this was from the time I was born, it was a get-go that my whole life was preparing humanity, hence Prepare for the Landing's the name of my book. And even though the scenario has changed a little bit from world evacuation, emergency, only a third of humanity surviving, to 95% minimum making it through, and now it's open first contact. And it's in 1979 again. They again said to me, this is preparation. Now we're getting closer to the time it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. The circumstance and timing is varied somewhat. And they're very flexible, and they're not rigid in a rigid kind of way as Earth people. They're extremely flexible, but they also adhere to a very disciplined kind of high ethical moral sense of we can't force help down anyone's throats. And the Cabal has tested them many times to see if they can make them go over the line and to try to do in their aspect of, the Galactic Pacts, which is based on the Galactic Law when the Galactic Federation was first formed. There was a very strong sense about the Prime Directive that we can't force. But that doesn't mean we won't intervene if certain things come to push and shove and the safety of the entire planet being blown up. We're going to step in and stop that, especially now after Maldek blew up between Jupiter and Mars. Used to be Maldek, Murdic. At that point, they added the other thing that never would a planet be allowed to self-destruct. At that point, they were then obliged to step in and stop that from free will getting out of hand, where the rest of the universe is being influenced by the negative patterns that this destruction. Space travel was affected after Maldek blew up for a little while because of negative harmonic imbalance things that came about.
Now, when did Maldek officially blow up?
Well, it's interesting. I've heard variances.
Me
I
too.
remember being an emissary sent there from the Galactic Council Karnak and Varna were the two civilizations, kind of like Lemurian Atlantis or originally the old timeline, Russia and the United States. There's a whole story behind timeline changes. And up to more recently 6,000 years, I've heard that, as well as many times, see the timeline, on a higher level, there's not time as we think of it. So the interpretation of when something happened according to Earth, is kind of a strange thing. Ashtar always says he doesn't relate to linear time at all, even though he's gotten a little better at trying to interpret the way time has been. Now we're shifting from third into a higher dimensional sense. So as he says, even though they're still printing up calendars and appointment books trying to measure time, very soon it won't have relevance to us because we're coming out of it. So to say 6,000 years ago or earlier or hundreds of thousands of years ago when it blew up, I find it difficult to even place it in a sense of time, because I've heard so different variances about when that happened. I just remember being an emissary sent there to warn them and stop them, but we didn't evacuate very many people off the planet. Souls were blown apart. It was horrendous. We would never allow that to happen again. And the significance of that thing is that so we meet all three requirements and then some. Now, as Colbert says, I totally agree with that about here's the deal about complexities of sudden unexpected things occurring in this new timeline. Expect the unexpected, but it's wonderful in one way because as duality will soon cease to exist and there'll never be a place like duality again, after we get a little cosmic R&R here shortly, and we come back to finish up the cleansing of the planet, and they could literally transform Earth in a few hours from the way it is to advanced paradise world. But they're not going to do it that fast. They're going to take a few years to have the complete restoration to a paradise level, so people can catch up to it a little bit, get their breath a little bit, and stay, because if it's done too fast, it would be too much for them. So they're going to do a little slow compared to what their real level of technology would be to allow people to do catch up, as I said, to keep abreast of the changes. It's still going to be very challenging how fast the changes are going to be, not delay any longer in any pain and suffering for sure. But there are a lot of wonderful, unexpected insights and discoveries about human nature as we go back into the loving, peaceful state we originally were, from the dog-eat-dog survival thing that many people took on just to survive. As the cabals moved out of the way and the new economic system officially is recognized and announced, when it finally dawns on everybody that we've come out of economic servitude, and we're beginning to have more freedom to travel and do what we want to do compared to in the past, that feeling, as it finally dawns on everybody, because it's been hardly has anyone ever experienced other than the power elite having freedom to do what they want to do, and they always screwed everything up.
Absolutely.
The average person, where the first shall be last and the last shall be first, as they say, to physiologically be in a new state without being, taxed to death, without being in economic servitude and enslavement, and now suddenly not having to work at some mundane job that you're just barely surviving, and have freedom and a financial abundance.
And not be poisoned through the chemicals,
what kind
the GMOs.
And to be able to be free, and to then suddenly also have the freedom to come and go off the planet and to the whole Earth, and to have total freedom, because you can't be in the higher state unless you're responsible anyway. You can't be operating at a higher dimensional level unless you innately are coming from your true sense. And the trouble is, a lot of people would like to come from that, but they're so beaten down. Ashtar sometimes says, when he looks down on the planet, he says, it's like looking at millions of people in straitjackets that they can barely even hope for something better because they've been beaten down so long. And so the sooner the better. I mean, he talks about pounding his fist on the council tables a few times in my sessions. He said that on the behalf of humanity. They want this for us, but there were some lessons we had to learn. They can't make it too easy for us, where it says pablum, or too difficult, where it literally is mission impossible, even though it feels like that sometimes. It's a balance.
Do you agree that we are an embryonic stage race?
Well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
They're saying that we're basically in the infancy toddler stage. as
Well, yeah,
a race.
we're a new root race. A new root race is coming. Cosmic men and women. I'll call it a combination of human and galactic that has never been combined before like this.
Wow, thank you for that clarification.
In other words, we're the admin cadman. They call that the blueprint of life of our physical body, coming from carbon-based to crystal and silicon. An entire planet ascending, and as fast as we're doing it, has never been achieved before. And so and here's the thing they say, which is unique. And this comes to the sessions all the time, that without having to remember all the horrific memories that gained us the wisdom of being in duality, we're about to merge human consciousness, that is the rarefied sense of wisdom, with our galactic consciousness that we left behind temporarily while we were down here. I still retain a little bit of it, even though I can't do any of the superpowers that I used to be able to do, as you would call it.
Right.
I just have the ability to tune into that level, and I remember what it was like being there. I had to be just like everyone else. Bummer. And so, it's still combining human and galactic in this kind of unique way is a whole, and it's very few. Think about it. Out of the entire 7 billion people, there's about 41%, 42% with all the new children, all the higher beings in children's bodies who've never been children during planetary change, who just took Earth embodiment recently, out of the entire world's population whose souls are directly off the ships.
Wow.
That number is still a small group compared to as Ashtar will say, how many zeros behind the one can I put? Quadruple number of the cosmic family who's never been on Earth. They're looking at us in awe because of what we've accomplished as we finish up and get prepared to report back to the councils and R&R coming up. We didn't do it for rewards, but isn't it nice to be rewarded? I mean, we didn't do it for rewards. They say it's unbearable compassion. That's the quality they call unbearable compassion. When we heard the great clarion call that Sonat Kumar sent out across the universe, and some thought it was a big suicide mission, and we were a bunch of masochists, and then some people didn't say it. But really, it was the unbearable compassion that drew us to come here.
Yeah,
and so what my sessions do is really help to clarify a little more for people out of all the things that they could focus on. And 6.5 million years are being summarized in 90 minutes. I mean, that's what they try to do. Is what can they talk about? Well, they talk about, at this point, what will make you more effective, but they do summarize some of those lifetimes and periods of human history and galactic origins because if you know what you did in the past, mistakes you made, you can now do better and take advantage of things as they come up in a more functional way. Is really what they're trying to help you with. It's still up to you. You still have free will, but when you align your free will with divine will, that things really, and also these encodements that they download that really energetically help so many people maximize and tap into that energy potential to utilize it a little bit better.
Well, we can all use that. And, speaking of the ground crew and speaking of the clarion call, clarify for me those that did decide to come through and, be a part of this mission. How many do you feel that there are of the so-called ground crew?
Well, the original core group was exactly 144,000.
Okay.
But that has increased, as I said, to about 42% of the world's population who kind of jumped on the bandwagon in a good way. Because what the Federation learned to do, because then, and I use the analogy when the original 144,000, that's 144 times 1,000, it just happened to be, quote unquote, that number. I kind of see Ashtar uses analogies, comparisons, which is kind of rough and hard, but imagine the talent show that on TV that we see, that's very commercialized. But I'm talking about, in a sense, you're as unique personalities as we all are throughout the universe. All of us are unique. That's why you have different agree to disagree variances, even though we agree on the same main sacred principles the Federation adheres to. But it literally was a huge training, boot camp kind of talent show, shifting among all the ones who trillions of beings reached out and answered that clarion call. But there was only a small number at that time with all their abilities who, it's like we're like the Navy SEALs of the Federation. We had to put ourselves through intense training to be able to desensitize ourselves to be on planet Earth. And I can tell you, compare the levels of paradise we came from to come down here. Now we're getting the longing to go home. And despite the dedication of our mission is a constant being heavy and light at the same time, balance. So since that original core group millions of years ago, as they began to discover ways to prepare and train more personnel to be able to handle, based on our earlier experiences, a continue building up the number of souls who, out of dedication, could come here. It's never been easy, especially souls who just recently came here for the first time. It's like, God, I mean, the most difficult, unbelievable, trying to get used to something so incredibly dysfunctional, so controlling with all the laws and statutes. That's why as you get out of the system, quote, you become sovereign, and you reclaim your sovereignty of their common law and things like that, like OPT, One People's Public Trust, and things where you declare foreclosure to an end to all agencies or beings or karmic relationships or anything that's controlling, manipulative, that interferes with your sovereignty. You have a right to choose who you hang out with, and it doesn't matter if it's galactic, human, or interdimensional. As Astro says that all the time.
Hallelujah, huh?
Yes.
I mean, now, when you talk about the 144,000, and I know you're familiar with Dolores Cannon, she talks about the 3 waves. Do you agree with that? That there's like the first wavers, and they really took it. They were the first ones to blaze a trail, and
I would agree, basically, because I've heard similar things from various different sources. They may use different terminology, different in a kind of a different interpretation, but it's all very similar. There may be a difference in time frame or how many there were and things, but it's all pretty much basically the same description and different, terminology describing the same thing.
So like the first waivers had to be the right stuff, as they say, right, to be able to withstand this experience. Now, what do you feel about the Vatican and the Jesuits? How do you perceive they fitting into this whole thing?
Well, I've been taking Neil Keenan and I've been kind of following. The crimes against state, church and state, all the crimes against the indigenous peoples of Canada, with the Queen dead, who is definitely, there's a lot of reptilian energy to some of these people, and even Karen Hurdis, Karen from the banking industry, she even recently did something, I didn't see it, but the title was "They Are Not Human."
I just interviewed her a couple of weeks ago, and she said that she now came out, and I remember she talked to me on the phone. She's like, I don't really know if I want to, put any attention on this. And I said, Karen, if you have this information, just bring it out there. And she said that, it's like undeniable information that she's been given, that the species behind the Black Pope are the Homo capensis, which are the elongated skull beings.
And they're shapeshifters, and they thrive on human fear energy. That's why they do satanic ceremonies and everything. And there's a huge amount under the Vatican, huge number of bodies, and plus there's 60 miles of catacomb libraries that are going to be brought up, from the Knight Templars and all that stuff. But the satanic stuff they were involved in, and all the I don't want to go into any of that too much. But
Michael, where did these guys come from?
Well, they came from when the Galactic Rebellion happened, and not all reptilians are negative. There's some very benevolent ones, but these ones were very, susceptible. Their personality sense of, Nephilim energy related as compared to Elohim, they had a certain, everybody's personality is unique, and certain beings unique and somehow were susceptible to becoming corrupted, and versus others choosing not to. We all have free will, and even though dark side always likes to tempt people, to pull people into that, it's our job to not tempt honest people, not to make it easy, make it instead of an incentive to do the right thing, not some religious, hypocritical, thou shalt. No, I'm not talking about. I'm talking about universal ethics, not religious morality.
Correct. But I'm asking you, she's basically saying they are not the reptilians. They are Homo capensis. She's saying it's a different race, a different species altogether.
I don't know. Again, so I guess I could. There could be more than one species. To me, a lot of them are reptilian, but then there could be some of those too. I mean, that feels reptilian. Well, she's saying it's not. To me, that feels kind of reptilian, though.
Interesting.
I don't know. Because there'd be different types of reptilians. Some are more alligator, crocodile looking, and then there's ones that are more human in one way, but they have a similar. There's different types of those.
So there were actually reptilians with the elongated skulls.
Yeah, there's one story I heard about. people coming in contact in New York City a number of years ago until they got taken out, I think. But there were underground stories about reptilian entities living under. There was a city, a building called the what's the name of that building? It's actually the only building with huge, big red neon letters 666. I can't think of it right now, the name of it, but it's underneath there. There was actually a story many years ago, the Saga and Argosy magazine, of somebody delivering something, and they went into this, the elevator went below where they were supposed to, and they came down to this kind of international banker meeting, and this reptilian alligator creature is standing there. Looks like standing up like a man, and and started to turn around because it sensed this person. They freaked out and they fled. And then somebody else was delivering food or something, and the same thing. And the Rothschilds and Rockefellers definitely, to my mind, are reptilian. They have this energy. But I have picked up that like the fourth and fifth recent generation in these 13 families, the light has started to infiltrate the reptilian lineage.
I agree. Now, what do you feel about Obama? Do you agree that he is a walk-in?
Well, we call him a walk-in. Now, I have an interesting take on him. I know there's a lot of pro and con about him. I can just say I know for a fact, it's not only my sources say, but Andrew Brishago, it was Project Pegasus, it was Senator Time, Project in the Secrets Mars program. There's a whole story about, when Obama went by the name of Barry Santo, and according to Andrew Brishago and my sources tell me it's true, that Obama was born into a CI family. And that one of his covers was being born in Kenya. He really wasn't born in Kenya, but that was a cover when he went on a few CIA operations to infiltrate a few extremist groups. And then he got out of it and did social work later. But a lot of people and then he hung out. And see, as I said earlier, the whistleblowers are of many types. Those who go through whistleblowing as we would define it in the typical sense of Edward Snowden. Then there are those who wear double hats who some people get mixed readings about, because in order to do a sting operation, you have to confuse people and even make some people think, oh, he's the dark side. But we have to kind of go deeper into what is that person's energy. Before he was elected, there was a huge number of people, very psychic, tuning into his energy and feeling he was of the light. But then, because presidents are nothing but figureheads, and because families are threatened with torture and death if they don't go along with an agenda, and, according to my sources, he has had contact. I have to be careful what I say a little bit because, there's just, things are getting really close, and I can just say to you that on a public level, he has to play out a certain role, as does Putin. But when he and Putin met, what occurred on a secret level versus what they were doing egoistically on a public level, it's quite opposite. And that people like Edward Snowden, who was at a meeting there, let's just say there's a lot going on that the average person has no knowledge of. And in order to have a sting operation occur, you have to make people convince them of certain things opposite in what's really happening, and vice versa. So a lot of people that through years, in a political sense, some people who thought, because somebody's in a particular political party, and to me it has nothing to do with Republican or Democrat. Who are they? Whether it's the Bushes or the Clintons, they're all corrupt. Okay. But then, when the sting operation would finally get close to finishing, you had to have somebody come in that would confuse a lot of people who would wear two hats, and he's dark or he's light, and people get their buttons pushed because of their political orientation. I'm looking to where they are on an energetic level, having talked to numerous whistleblowers or people who are in the dark side, who retain whistleblowers, who were higher beings who infiltrated the dark side. Wouldn't that also be possible up to the level of the president? Now, up to now, none of them have really, other than President Kennedy, who was of the light. And they warned him not to be in Dallas that day, but you can't force somebody not to be somewhere. I just feel my perception about Obama is he's waiting in the wings until the right moment. And one of the first things he's probably going to do is the announcement about the new economic system, because they have to officially announce it. Of course, they may put a little spin on it and try to explain it a little differently, but my intel sources seem to imply that there's going to be some kind of announcement here shortly, because if they don't reevaluate, the whole system is going to collapse. There's just no two values about it. And one of the people I respect is Lindsey Williams, who, while he's been wrong maybe a few times, most of the time he's been right on. Everything his power elite friends tell him. He's a minister that was up in the oil pipeline in Alaska 40 years ago, and he befriended some of the power elite, and they've shared stuff with him, and he's been most of the time pretty right about. And he said in December 4th in an interview that in the next few months before April 1st, the system has to change over. Well, here we are almost coming up to the middle of March. And then we have Courtney Brown, who's a remote viewer, originally in February. But now he says this month, after the 15th, something so dramatic is going to happen. And I'm thinking to myself, it's going to affect the human race. What would that be but a change of our economic system? Would suddenly bring millions of people who've invested in the dinar or whatever, suddenly have all this abundance that would psychologically change their... And I don't know when, it's like cosmic top secret. It's going to happen to throw off the last of the cabal. I mean, really looking at it, we want it to be as smooth as possible. So if it takes a little longer to get rid of every single one of the cabal, I'm willing to wait a little bit longer. I know people are suffering, and there's things I'd like to do, and there's limitations and stuff. But it's like you get the genie out of the bottle, you're not going to get her back in. There's no you do it once right, and that's it. So,
and isn't it true that we've done this several times before and did not succeed?
Well, are you talking about modern time or?
No, I'm talking about other so-called timelines when
we
were sent in to evacuate and or intervene and did not succeed.
Yeah, and this time I feel like they've gotten it right this time.
Yeah.
I feel like to delay it and make it a little more perfect, put it off a little bit. In fact, the reason a lot of people after 2012 got disillusioned and cynical, and some people thought in December 21st overnight they're going to become ascended master with superhuman powers, but that's not what. I had this vision, very powerful vision, in the late part of 2012, when it became clear to me it ain't going to happen. A lot of people were hoping because of the Mayan calendar and stuff. And I had a vision. It was like a council meeting 8 or 9 times bigger than a football stadium. There were millions of us all crammed in there, and I shared this with many people already, where it was like the old saying, "It's so close I could taste it," where all of us who have been on a ground crew many times, now we're getting ready for some R&R. Well, this other 5 or 10% of humanity that I said wouldn't make it through unless we kind of delayed what some of the rest of us would do as surrogates, that in this meeting where we're all talking to one another simultaneously, telepathically, like we often do, multitasking telepathically, and there were members of the Galactic fleets there, and those of us, the Earth embodiment, were there in this meeting. And we all decided, and I had the image later of this, this person behind a glass wall, where there was this delicious gourmet meal spread out on the table. This is a symbolic thing. You could smell it, but you couldn't get to it. You could see it. And the wall's going to go up any moment, and we're starving. We know it's going to go up, but we could smell it. Oh, my God. And we're starving so close we could taste it. That's what it was like. But here we are in a galactic meeting, and it came to us from divine creation that if we delayed the divine intervention just by 2 or 3 or 4 years at the most, maybe, no one's exactly when, but we put it off a little bit, this other 5 or 10%, based on the momentum that we, the rest of us, having now achieved from the third to now 90 to 95%. If we did this, put things off for us, and kind of sacrifice a little bit of time for ourselves, put ourselves in a holding pattern, build up the collective momentum field of the planet, we could pull the other 5 or 10% minus the 1% of the cabal out of the way, pull them forward, and they would make it through rather than having to go another 100,000 years of karmic cycle, whatever it would be, I don't know, but we could shift things. And so we put it off a little bit, which confused a lot of light workers. And I get this sometimes when I connect with people who do sessions. I feel like I got off track. I messed up my mission. I got stuck. I felt like it should have happened before now. Well, that's an accurate feeling because it really should have, but we delayed it to give the other small group a chance to make it through.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. I mean, that is something that everyone needed to hear today.
Right.
And I commend you for bringing that information forward.
And I want everybody to pat themselves on the back. If you feel you're harsher on yourself sometimes than you are toward other people, even though there's still this little bit of pettiness, not so much it used to be among the New Age, but some people get their feathers ruffled and they get out of sorts, or they think, when they realize, as the masters have said many times, if at any moment somebody decided to abort their mission, even though getting back and reporting to the council, one would feel disappointed, they don't harshly judge us as Astra says so often, like when you're pointing fingers at somebody, you get 3 fingers pointing at yourself. He says that a lot, like these sayings. Well, he says, if you could see how much we love you, if you could see how much unconditional love, and he says many times, if any other being up here is too critical of any of you, he said, I challenge them to come down, live for 24 hours on planet Earth, I would argue you would do it better than this other being because, again, those of us who are here are like the Navy SEALs of the Federation, where it's well called as the Eagle Commanders, the eagle, the bird, the eagle, which is a divine messenger, the Eagle Commanders, with a circle within a circle of those who often have been on the front lines taking a lot of flack, from the cabal. Some of us choosing to be targeted to show their vulnerability. Because when they target us, they reveal their weaknesses. So some of these dry runs I referred to really was to expose the cabal. And a couple instances in the past when I thought it was going to happen, after it didn't, our forces knew some of the vulnerability that the cabal hadn't revealed that needed to be exposed in some way behind the scenes that allowed them to get some authority by what we put ourselves through that would allow them some authority to go in and remove some situations that they wouldn't have had authority to do.
That's great.
So we paid the price and went in balancing it by something that they normally wouldn't have authority, but us putting ourselves through something that was extremely emotionally disturbing. And I had the vision of Job and what he went through, far worse than what was described in the biblical sense, because he volunteered to be in there as a test of faith. That if they said, because he had all the memories of all these meetings, but he couldn't remember that one meeting when he volunteered to play that role. Because if he knew it was a test, would it have been a test? No. But because they, of course, said, well, if you can get one of your incarnated sons and daughters to go through this and not lose their faith, we'll come around the light. Well, of course, it's normal. They lied. They didn't come around as they pretended. But when he was beamed up by the Merkaba off the sand, where he was laying in the sand, then he remembered the meeting. Aboard, he had fulfilled his mission. And he was able to prove that no one's faith could be broken. It wasn't a blind faith. He was a very pragmatic person, but he could remember his past lives. He was married to his other half, and he had all his family members removed from him on the most horrendous things, and he still refused to give in and curse out divine creation as the dark force was trying to have him to do, because he could not see any karma for what he was going through. He could see his past lives. How can you relate to something when you feel God deserts you and you feel empty inside? Even then he refused to give in, and then suddenly he's being back on the ship. Now he feels God within him again.
Okay. Question.
Yeah.
So what is the reward system to those that have fulfilled their missions?
Well, again, nobody is left out. As I say so many times, the masters say, none of us do things for rewards, but isn't it nice to be rewarded? Well, the thing that was promised to us before we came into human embodiment, I remember up there discussing it in the councils, and we're getting debriefing. The waiting room is getting ready to almost parachute in enemy territory, really, compared to the paradise world we came from. And we're sitting there, and it was discussed that when it came down to this, what was originally thought of as waves of evacuation, but are really waves of and then they're, being lifted back up. We were promised that we would not only be reunited with our other half, have been separated, because usually one of them is on Earth and one of them is off the planet. There have been a few exceptions, but we were told we'd get our immortal physical light body. It's been a storage up there back, our Elohim powers. We would come back as liberation teams, travel around, prepare the rest of humanity for the other waves, which now in relation to first contact, they can hopefully come down. So we would play more responsible roles interacting with earthly humanity that's been here and taking more interactive roles with the galactic fleet. Being intermediaries. So in that sense of being more directly involved in the process, we'd be given back our power as an authority in a sense to engage with humanity and prepare other people to be lifted up.
Thank you for that. That's a confirmation of something I received.
R&R means going back onto the mothership, reconnecting with our cosmic families, and being part of the Earth Alumni Party. And I used to call it the Rapture, but it's not a religious thing. It's a cosmic galactic moment of graduation. And all these light clubs that I remember hanging out in, partying down, makes Earth parties look really dull and boring. Nectar of the gods and eating eating etheric food. Not that we have to eat, but like the replicators in Star Trek, manifesting these wonderful. In fact, some of the beings I communicate with who are really fun. I mean, there are beings like Volter, who's a cosmic psychotherapist. He comes through when I do updates after the first session, and they're doing cosmic straws. Others come through, so he gives psychological analysis and insights. And Rokan is this. Ashtar often mentions the team when I'm doing a session. He'll refer to, and these beings know most everybody I'm going to connect with. They have all hung out together. Ashtar told me a long time ago that everyone that I'll ever connect with, he's crossed paths with either as members of the councils or millions of years ago or sometime. He has crossed paths, and so to him, they're friends he's reconnecting with. He says there's no strangers but friends reconnecting. So the reward is the knowledge that we liberated the planet. That's the greatest reward of all. And coming back with our cosmic family, having R&R, and having a chance to go back and well, even on Earth, being able to travel around with the new financial system is going to be a major reward in itself, to feel more freedom and help humanity with all the abundance that's going to be available.
So do you feel that as those of us return in those capacities, are we going to be well received by the masses?
Well, that's the whole reason they're delaying it, because once the event happens, which is this, this new energy that we're already feeling a little bit, which is already literally becoming user-friendly for those of the light, well, it's also discombobulating the cabal. It's doing things like causing weapons that fire go back to the armory, it fires, you go back on the battlefield, they're not firing. There's a lot of incidents of this right now, guns, weapons not working, traditional type weapons. And of course, the Federation will never allow nuclear war. So those who are concerned about the Ukraine, the cabal is desperate. Since they couldn't get their false flag in Syria, and then they try, after Iraq being the last major war, and this is the whole thing about the RV and everything. There's all these things happening. The cabal's getting extremely desperate, so they're getting very accident prone. And this is the one thing I was told. One of the things was after the false flag of 9/11, which was a big wake-up call, the cabal planned at least 70 events bigger than 9/11 that they've neutralized. That would have decimated everyone but 500 million people would have been left. That was the cabal's plan under human genocide. Well, that's not gone according to plan, because people are waking up and they're neutralizing the chemtrails and all this stuff, and they're doing they have allowed little false flags like the Aurora Theater shooting, the Boston Marathon. Then you see actors actually playing these roles. There's videos all over the internet showing Santiago was a big false flag. Actors playing, children supposedly died in hospitals, or they're still alive. I mean,
now, I was going to bring that up to you. You've probably been up to wellaware1.com, which goes over this in great detail. But the good guys, so to speak, those such as Assange and Snowden, and I think even Obama, they're showing up on that website as also being actors.
Well, there's where you have to use discernment and realize that there's also disinformation, there's also misinformation. And Obama, they always are kind of trying to make it look like, oh, he's doing this, or what is called the honey trap, blah, blah, blah. And that's not what's happening. They have to blame him for a lot of things. See, somebody's got to be the scapegoat. Okay, so he's going to be the one who's going to be guilty. And the executive orders that he passed wasn't against the masses. It was against the cabal. To round them up, there had to be some things put in place to give a certain structure to that sting operation while it's going on. But I know a lot of people have, there's a lot. It's easy to blame a person, but until you're in their shoes, and especially if you're threatened with torture and death, that's quite a different thing. But on the other hand, after he had contact, then there was certain, shall we say, certain realization, even though he knew he still had to play a role, a traditional role, but I know he's biting at the bit to try to do a speech that he's been wanting to do a long time. Now, it's interesting, in 2011, I got an interesting, I got an interesting Christmas card from the White House. It was one of those fold-out cards that I don't know if anyone else got one. Let's just say some of us are on some special list. This is all I'm going to tell you, because I've done articles about him in a very positive way. And I even, and I know there were things I said at a certain time that almost blew his cover earlier on, because I felt, well, I'm tuning into some stuff. I can't help it. And then I hear from other people. Then I also hear this other stuff trying to contradict that, what the cabal was trying to do. Trying to convince, you're just making all this up, blah, blah, blah. But I always note where certain information's coming from. So, yes, on some of the blogs that have some good information, then you see other stuff that confuses people. that the cabal, some of these people who post things to try to make you doubt what you are, make you doubt your own inner guidance. That, oh, you're all messed up now. Your guidance is really off, kind of thing, because they, this is the whole thing. And there was I'm trying to remember this one website where they put, they pretend that it's from a Russian source. It's really from the CIA. Fiasha Kosal, I'm trying to think of her name, or it looks like female name, Fiasha. I can't pronounce it right, but I've seen this sometimes. There are those whose job is to post things on amongst all the other stuff that's true to then make people think, the ones that, to confuse who's really doing what.
Oh, yeah. It's like the government trolls that are getting paid to.
They are. Now, there's not as many of them. There's not as many of them because there's more of the light coming on the planet. It's causing them to have a peak of conscience.
Yeah.
And so it's getting more difficult to find people. And I just tried to do a major email blast. It was many years since I had this happen. Originally, when I first came out in the 90s and started doing some email, my phone calls and emails were screwed with severely, and that's when I thought, hey, I must be doing something right if I'm not much of a threat. So they did it again. I just tried to do 2 email blasts with hundreds of people. And, when your stuff comes through, I'm a little lazy sometimes where I won't remove all the addresses. There's 5, or there's maybe a dozen, 2 dozen or one. And I have 100, around 70 or 80 names I have 7 Gmail email accounts. I'm doing this mass, and I keep adding more people. Well, when names don't go through, the ones that always show up in parentheses in the Gmail accounts, which, of course, unless you've got Linux on your system, it allows the backdoor of the CIA and NSA to come in and screw with things. And, that's just the way it is. So it's been a while since they did that. So I tried to send out one of them about the mass meditation that Cobra was suggesting. Well, and they go by titles. So I sent out this thing, and every one of them, a delivery failure, and in parentheses, 100. Now, every one of my Gmail accounts said 100 failure. Now, that, first of all, that's an automatic system. That's when he pushed the button, okay? Where if they didn't show up, it would be 70, 80. If all of them didn't show up, which is 1 out of 1 trillion to 1, that would even happen. Usually there's 1 or 2 besides the 5 or 12 that are going to automatically come back because those are email addresses that I didn't remove, and I'm a little lazy about that. I always expect that. But most of them always go through, 99% of them. All of the ones who are legit, they go through. Except this time, that's what happened. It said 100. All of them said 100. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, no, I run into that all the time with the implant removal process. I mean, it's like the interference is unbelievable, especially on the part of being able to receive and send emails. And then they come up that email doesn't exist, which full well and good it does. That's just part of my daily life. But hey, we're getting down to 20 minutes, and I have several questions that I know people want me to ask you. Okay, so the first one is, how do you feel that China is playing a part in all of this?
Well, China, like Russia, they're part of the BRIG, system that includes over 160, and it's increasing now. Countries have all joined against the Federal Reserve, against the NATO alliance, the G8 or whatever. Russia is playing a very important, and China is aligned with them too, to stop the, Federal Reserve fiat phony economic and servitude system that's kept us in control for a long time. So I see them playing a very important key role as stopping the cabal from instigating whatever they're trying to do. The Galactics are doing most of it, but the good guys, the Liberation Group, that's been around, that Cobra is referred to many times, has been a huge amount of work behind the scenes. That it's a full-time operation. But China definitely, when I first heard about the White Dragon Society, I remember being connected with that group. I had visions when I was a kid I was in charge of a fleet of sailing schooners, taking gold from the wharfs of Europe over to the beginning of the United States. I saw the movie National Treasure, and I saw a lot of truth in that.
I did too.
And I realized when David Wilcock did Financial Tyranny, and he was talking about how the Chinese funded the American Revolution. This is true. And so they're playing a key role when they fund now. They expected to be paid back, but of course they never did. And of course, Benjamin Fulford talks about a lot. I don't agree with all things, but I agree with a lot of what he's talking about. And there's some misinformation sometimes, but he's pretty accurate in a lot of it. Well, it's just that there is, so the Chinese are playing a very key role because there's a huge amount of gold. But I am also told that most of the gold is off the planet. I agree with Cobra on that about, temporarily took it off so that the bad guys have run out of funding. They can't fund any more of their blackout projects. Okay. So
interesting. Well, and do you also feel that China has the United States now, and I should say the United States corporation? Do you feel that they actually have them in a checkmate situation financially?
Yeah, I do, because when I heard about the thing about the IRS and a few people I am aware of has had suddenly a lien put on their bank account, all of a sudden, that showed me that the IRS, which is about to go down the tubes, literally, they are desperate, so they're trying to, they're scrimmaging quickly to try to gain some, in their wild death throes, I guess you could call it. As they go down, they're going to take other people with them. It's like, if we can't have it, you're not going to have it. But if you go back to the beginning of the IRS, you see how they were formed and under unconscionable, they've been they could stop, when you pay your taxes. The truth is, and Karen and it says this too, that, 40% goes to the Vatican and 60%. No,
40% goes to the City of London and 60% goes to the Vatican.
Yeah, right. I forgot the percentage. Yeah. But that's true. And it doesn't go to the infrastructure. It pads the pockets of the international controller.
Right.
So if you're going to be, so really, when people realize the real truth about it, now what's about to happen is supposedly there's U.S. Treasury notes that are supposed to be released here soon that is backed by gold. I don't know when that's supposed to be. Now, I had a vision a couple years ago about the Nasara checks being printed up also in a certain undisclosed location, and there was huge pile of rainbow currency in the background piled up. I saw it. It was like I was viewing this place, and these printing machines were spraying out these checks, and they were being put in the back of this, undisclosed location. These white trucks were backing up, and they were pushing a bunch of checks that they were mailing off to everybody. I didn't know when that was going to be, but it was some very near future kind of vision. Or they were definitely printing up all this.
That's interesting, because I used to be a little bit like Cobra and collected a lot of intel back in the 90s, and that was one of the things I was told, is the rainbow money had been printed a long time ago.
Yeah.
That they were storing it until the right time.
Yeah, and I saw them huge pile with, I guess, was like plastic over it. It was there piled up. This one, and look, how like those carts they have in the post office. And they were wheeling them around, and out of this machine, and it was a big roll of paper. I don't know if it was the same location or another place, but it was coming out automatically on this, and the thing stamping the envelope, and I could see, and I was looking down on it, and it said $100,000 was on the check. Now, all I know, that's what I saw. It was very, very vivid, and it was so realistic feeling. And then, that was 2 years ago, so what can I say?
You know what, Michael? I think it's true also how interesting, if we look at our childhoods, and we notice that the two main big bad wolves that were presented to the United States of America citizenry were Russia and China, and we're now looking at they're the two major players in the BRICS Eastern Alliance, and that they themselves are actually bringing forth this new change because of the power that they hold, and the fact that they've got the U.S. by the balls basically right now. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and to me, even though Obama has to play this kind of macho public role, like men on earth tend to do. When he was meeting with Putin, they were discussing all of this. They were going over the whole sting operation, and they were going to play these roles because in order to make people believe, you have to be a good actor.
Yeah.
And so Stone was connected with that meeting also. He's been interviewed since then. Of course, he doesn't really disclose what was going on because of connect with Anonymous and the liberation group that he's connected with. I'm just saying that they knew this, so both Putin and Obama have to play the typical macho kind of, ooh, you're doing this and puff up and all that stuff. And the people are caught up in that. They don't understand. They can't, that there's a sting operation going on that's been going on for many years. In order to be successful, it's going to take a while to be successful till the good guys could finally get in these positions with the Galactics helping them. That's what made it successful, because they can monitor exactly what's happening.
I agree, and I think there's a huge push coming down with the common law and educating all of us on common law, which is the true law. In fact, I'm going to be interviewing Kevin Annett regarding this very topic in about a week or two. I can't remember when.
Yes.
It's very important for us to become more aware of how we could take our rights back.
And that's the whole thing, yes, becoming sovereign universally and declaring our sovereignty and getting out of the system. And, of course, it all has to do with how much you want to spend time fighting going to court because they're not common law courts, and what you say and what you don't say that allows them to have authority over you. And I've read and studied that thing for years. I mean, Richard Miller, many years ago, that I knew in California, was one of the first people who got out of the system, and he really demonstrated, to me, you have to use common sense. It's like I'm kind of leaving the system, but I'm a lot out of it too. It depends on how much of your time do you want to spend fighting that battle. But more and more people have woke up and have gotten out of the system, as I use that phrase, and have declared their sovereignty officially. There's things you do that. There's people I know who are a little more experts, and I would never give advice per se because I've studied it, but there are those who are much more, have been successful at fighting the good fight, as I call it. But you still have to use I call it galactic common sense. You have to decide how much in the system or not you're going to be, depending on your mission. Because when the whole thing pretty soon finally is when the old system collapses here and the new system comes in on top of that, it's already in place. It's just a matter of officially announce it. But I do want to, before we end the show, I do want to also kind of go back to, just to remind people too about my workshops coming up and also, about my reading. So those who would like to experience it, can go to my website and they can call me. Also, I have my phone number there. They want to set up an appointment. They want to attend the workshops, or I'm also open to being sponsored. I can do, I can do a workshop over, webinar at some point. I've done that in the past. I'm right now focusing on physical events, that are here in Seattle at my girlfriend's and my place here, coming up on April 26th, the two workshops, the Who's Who in the Cosmic Directory and Dynamics of Cosmic Telepathy Channeling Workshop. And then in May, I'm going to be over in Virginia. I'm going to, as soon as my girlfriend is also having some computer challenges right now. I'm trying to update my website. I always try to update it with certain things in my blog. There's some good information there you can check out. I'm going to try to update it with the events so people can, if they want to attend, if they want to fly in or whenever they can. And
so everybody do Michael a favor and visit his website at www.michaelelegion.com, and that's ELLEGION.com.
Right. And my phone where people can call me is 206-235-8402, and that's 206-235-8402, and that's listed also at the website there. Those who want to set up 90-minute transformational channel sessions, channel readings, or go to the workshops can find out about it. The workshops, again, I haven't updated that on the website. I'm having some computer glitches right now, but I can let them know about that.
So, Michael, let's clarify something else here. Tell us your opinion on Comet, Ison, Nibiru, and Planet X.
Well, that's some interesting things. I will say that I think I have a different opinion than some people. I mean, there's evidence that if they themselves aren't motherships, there's some big motherships in the vicinity where they are that are affecting. I know the moon, for example, is a big planetoid mothership from thousands of years ago. And there's been major footage that's been released by NASA scientists where, dozens, if not hundreds, of big motherships were lined up against the sun.
Yes.
And there was a gigantic triangular portal that opened up, and that's even shown in some Mayan and Aztec ruins and it's showing a similar thing that very similar to the big triangular shape that was like about a third or half the size of the sun that opened up. And the sun, like all stars, are portals. And my perception, I was told about that Nibiru was coming through, but it wasn't going to cause any damage this time around, because every 26,000, 27,000 years it comes through, that we didn't have to be so concerned about it. And even, what's her name on, connected with the Nibirian Council? I'm trying to think of her name.
Oh, yeah. Well, do you feel that the Nibiruans are peace loving?
Well, I feel that they are now. I think that they did involve themselves with, as Michael Tellinger talks about, they came to Earth because they needed gold for something to do with their atmosphere, for the gravity and the balance of the system. And I don't know if you could say these people were these slaves because they were in a paradise kind of condition. They used energetic system to dematerialize the gold out of the ground. They were using not exactly hard labor thing as we would think of more modern slavery kinds of things, but people were living in much more beautiful conditions back then. But Earth has a huge amount of gold that they were needing, and so we can look at, and there was different opinions about, but I think they have grown, and recently there was and recently what areas of the universe that had some little forbidden zones, I call it, have come around to the light. There's been a huge cleansing of the heavens, so there are Federation ships parked on Nibiru at this time, and they're very much energetically helping. There's a lot of shifts that are going on all levels of the universe. So if they had some negative intent at one time, and since they're not respecting sovereignty, I think there's been a major shift recently, and I've joined with the rest of the Federation to go on with the divine principles.
Awesome. And so last but not least, what do you feel is the role of Agartha in this whole picture?
Well, the Hollow Earth stuff, I've had a copy of Admiral Byrd's Secret Diary for years. Zara, the inner Earth being, said the only missed thing in the diary was about when Admiral Byrd flew through the polar opening. It was actually the moon was out bright, and it looked very bright, almost half the brightness of the sun, or very brighter than normal, and it was described as the sun, but it was really the moon. Other than that, there was one or two other little things in it, but most of it was fairly accurate about Admiral Byrd in his own handwriting, describing him going to the inner Earth. And so Zara came out, who Ando Hart put up the Hollow Earth Network website about 3 years ago, I think it was, to help him get his information out. He was trying to complete what Admiral Byrd wasn't able to complete when he left and went back to the Hollow Earth after he left the outer surface. When they, in 1956, his last entry in that diary, he said, I did my duty to the monstrous military-industrial complex. He talked about the longest night of how the sun of light would come again and the truth would be revealed. And it's incredible. When you read the diary, you can feel him saying this and how, because he and his family was threatened. He was threatened, actually, if he shared the truth. So Zara came out, he and his sister. It's an interesting story about them coming to the outer Earth, and now they are major members of the Federation, and they're just waiting for the outer Earth people to energetically now align so that they can come out on the outer surface. And even what Sheldon Neidl talks about, the inner Earth beings, the Ascended Masters, and the Federation, are all going to be working openly with everybody on the outer Earth, and we're no longer going to be quarantined. Quarantine is about to be lifted.
I know. We are in such exciting times, and I just want to remind everyone to take a moment and thank all of our galactic brothers and sisters for all the immense amount of support they're providing us. Because one thing that Cobra said to me, and it rang like a bell, and that is we would have been taken out a long time ago if it were not for the fact that we have incredible divine intervention.
In fact, Astor told me over 25 years ago, I don't remember what it was, I was bummed about some stupid mundane thing. And Astor, he's always commenting me, and he goes, well, truth be told, the Earth should be in 8 times worse mess than it is right now. And my response is, I cannot comprehend twice as bad. He goes, well, that's how much we've been intervening behind the scenes. Now, of course, it's going to become more overt. They're going to start showing themselves a lot more. Like they're showing over the Ukraine right now. They're coming down more and more, gearing up for that moment they get the green light to make a mass appearance.
It is so exciting. Really, it is so exciting. Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you. This is clearly divine. What do you want to call this? Timing for you and me?
Yes, I think so. You live in Vista, and I grew up in Vista, California, so it's kind of, synchronicity is kind of interesting.
Yeah, that too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you've provided the ground crew today, and we all send you love and light.
Well, I thank you for having me on, and I look forward to connect with more of the light workers on an individual, one-to-one basis and do the transformational channel readings, the cosmic heads up, and get you more plugged into your mission. And also those who would like to attend the workshops, you can get a hold of me. And as I like to say, keep your eyes on the skies.
Yes, and everybody, do not forget, take the time today to thank our galactic families. Take care, everyone. God bless. Thank you, Michael. What a wonderful interview. I'm so grateful.
Well, thank you, and our friends upstairs appreciate all the work you're doing, and of course I'm going to be soon doing a session for you too. This is going to be interesting.
I know. I can't wait. I'll tell everybody about it.
Okay. Well, take care.
Okay, everybody, take care. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.